2 weeks. That's how long this flu has had me. Properly knocked me out. The kind where you stop caring what day it is, where you cancel everything because the alternative is being upright and you can't be upright. And here's what's been going around my head, laying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I'm 40 years old. I'm about a year away from my exit date, and the thing that's worried me more than the flu is how slowly my body is coming back. Because somewhere in the last decade, when I wasn't paying attention, my body has changed. And the version of me that's supposed to walk out of law in 2027, the version that's supposed to do all these things I've been deferring for years, that version might not actually exist anymore. That's what I've been sitting with. So today's the day I stop pretending. And alongside the regular show, the deep dives, the quick takes, and my rants, I want to start something new for the next 12 months. A monthly check-in, the final year before fire, documented pillar by pillar. Health, money, identity, relationships, and purpose. We start with the one I've been hiding from. You've built the career, you're building the portfolio, you're close to freedom, so what now? Welcome to Life After Enough, money, meaning, and the life you design when work becomes optional. I'm Nick, I'm racing towards early retirement and figuring out who I become when the job no longer dictates what I do with my time. Let's get into it. What kept surfacing this week when I was lying there and half dying was Nepal. October 2025. I was halfway through my 6-month sabbatical from law. The centerpiece, the thing I'd built the whole sabbatical around, was Nepal. Manaslu circuit with my husband, then me solo for the Everest high passes and Island Peak. A proper expedition, the kind you train for a whole year. I'd booked it, bought all the gear, boots, sleeping systems, the works. Then Todd's family had an emergency and the whole leg got cancelled. The official story was clean. We'll save Nepal for when we can both do it together. But I actually felt kind of relieved. Properly relieved. Because underneath everything, I knew. My fitness just wasn't where it needed to be. I'd been diagnosed with sleep apnea earlier that year, and I was planning to carry a portable CPAP into the Himalayas, hoping it would work at altitude. I was anxious about the daily hiking, about the recovery days between, and being the one on the trip who couldn't keep up. I could have done it solo. I had the time, I had the gear, and I had the booking, but I chose not to. And I told myself I was being a good husband. That's partly true, but it's the story I told myself to avoid the harder one, which is that a guy who climbed Denali in a month-long expedition in Alaska, who'd led mountain trips for a living in another lifetime, who taught fitness as a personal trainer back when that was the job, he was relieved when his trip to the Himalayas got cancelled. That was the first time I properly knew that my body had been quietly failing for years and I hadn't been listening. The Nepal cancellation left me with a 5-week gap in the middle of the sabbatical. I didn't have a plan. I just went home and I started the 9 a.m. boot camp near the house. 5 mornings a week, coffee afterwards. That's the routine, and you know the story by now. That was the first time I'd exercised properly in years, and life started to come back. Not all at once, just energy I hadn't felt in a long time. Sleep, mood, a version of me I recognized from before. And I held on to that when I came back to law. I pushed the boot camp to early morning so work couldn't touch it. 3 sessions a week, sometimes 4. In my head, that was enough. That was the bit that proved I was still that guy, the PT, the mountain leader, the person with the discipline. But it wasn't enough. I arrived in Singapore at 180 pounds. By the end of March this year, I was 218 pounds. That's 38 pounds, 17 kilos. Most of it went on during COVID, when the world stopped and the legal work didn't, but everything else did. The walks disappeared, the hikes on the weekend disappeared, the standing meetings became sitting calls, the proper lunch became the desk lunch, and nothing else really came back when the world did. You don't notice the weight in real time. 3 or 4 pounds a year is invisible. The trousers go up a size, the shirts get a bit tight in the wash. You upgrade everything quietly, you stop taking photos from certain angles, and you stop noticing that photo on your office wall doesn't look like you anymore. I'll tell you a story that says everything about how my body became collateral damage to the job. I tried to take a CrossFit class. I told my office I was unavailable and properly told them calendar blocked. I got 4 phone calls during that hour. Same person. Every time I didn't answer, they rang again and again and again. That's what corporate law looks like. Even when you say no, the job says yes anyway. When you eat lunch at your desk for years on end, when dinner is whatever you can grab between calls, when weekends turn into long, boozy brunches that cost a fortune in Singapore, and the price is 2 days afterwards, flat on your back, hungover one day, anxiety the next. The slow climb back to feeling human, when the way you decompress from work costs you most of the weekend you are trying to recover. That's how 180 pounds become 218. And then I turned 40, and the same year I got the sleep apnea diagnosis. CPAP, the whole thing. I filed it under, of course. Of course I'll have sleep apnea. Of course my body's breaking down. Of course I can't do what I used to do. I'd given up on myself. Properly given up. And the boot camp 3 times a week, the thing I was now using as proof that I hadn't, was actually camouflage. Because exercise alone wasn't going to fix anything when the other 23 hours of the day were doing more damage than 1 hour could undo. I just didn't know that yet. I then decided to have some blood tests, and they came back. Lipids significantly off, the kind directly tied to being overweight and out of shape. The numbers a former PT should have looked at and known exactly what they meant. But I sat with them for months, and I did nothing. This is the part of the story I'm most ashamed of. Because if you're listening and you've had a warning shot of your own, bloods that came back wrong, a doctor's quiet concern, a number you flinched at, and you didn't do anything with it, well, I'm right here with you. I want to name that because most health content punishes you for that gap. Like the warning shot is supposed to be enough. Like once you see the data, you should obviously change. But you don't. You go back to your inbox. You go back to the next deal cycle. You file the bloods away and tell yourself you'll deal with it next month when work calms down. But as we know, work never calms down. I sat with those bloods. I made no changes, none, until something happened that I couldn't file away. Quick one before we continue. I send a weekly email every Monday morning that goes deeper than the podcast. It's not a recap, it's a separate idea, usually something more personal, plus a question to sit with for the week. It's free, it's one email, and you can sign up at lifeafterenough.com. Link is in the show notes. Okay, back to it. Someone close to me passed away, far before his time. He was 62, a heart attack. There 1 week, gone the next. What hit me, what cut through everything, wasn't the maths. He was 62 and I'm 40, 22 years. That's how long ago I qualified as a lawyer. That's the length of a typical career. It feels like nothing, and it is nothing. His death wasn't a story about choices, but it was a mirror held up to mine. Because once I started processing it, and really leaning into that process, what I couldn't look away from was my own pattern. The lipids I ignored, the stress I'd normalized, the visceral fat I hadn't bothered to measure, the sleep I was managing with a machine instead of fixing. The deferral, the I'll deal with it next year, for years. I wasn't just on a trajectory, I was running towards it. That was the moment I went out and got a DEXA scan, full body composition, everything. Visceral fat, the kind that wraps around your organs, the kind most directly linked to cardiovascular events, double what it should be. Body fat, 27.9%. The line for clinically obese, by the way, is 28%. I was a whisker from it. And I want to be specific about something here because this is the part where in most stories the host would say, that's when I knew. But the DEXA scan didn't change me. The death did. The DEXA just gave me numbers to act on. Data doesn't have teeth. Blood doesn't have teeth. The doctor's gentle concern doesn't have teeth. What has teeth is mortality landing close. And once that landed, something else landed with it. I'd spent the better part of a decade pouring everything into one thing: the money, the number, the portfolio, the escape plan, and the spreadsheet. And in the process, I'd let everything else erode. There's a phrase I keep coming back to now: the holy trinity of time, health, and money. Every piece of fire content I've ever made, including a lot on this show, has obsessed over one of them: the number. Because the number is the bit that's measurable, the bit that compounds, the bit that gives you a dopamine hit when you log your net worth and watch it tick up. But money on its own is the least useful of the three. Money buys time. That's the actual product. We're not chasing money, we're chasing the hours that money buys. And time without health is just sitting around waiting for it to pass. Here's the part I'd love to put to anyone listening who's a high earner. The job that lets you save aggressively, that same job is wrecking the body you'll need on the other side. The chronic stress, the decision fatigue, the food between calls, the weekends you spend recovering instead of moving, the exercise that gets bumped because something urgent came in at 5 p.m. You're paying for the fire number with the very thing you're trying to free. And the part that it took me 40 years and a death to face is that 1 hour of boot camp doesn't fix 23 hours of that. You can't out-train a stressed-out lawyer's diet. You cannot out-train chronic sleep deprivation. You cannot out-train a job that won't respect the boundaries you set. That is the trap. So April 1st this year was the day I started doing this properly. I'm not going to give you a workout plan. I'm not that guy anymore. But for anyone wondering what properly looks like, here is my stack. I track my food now, calories and protein, because at this stage of my body's relationship with food, I cannot trust my own estimates. I was undercounting by something like 1,000 calories a day. I'm doing 2 zone 2 cardio sessions a week, the boring kind where you can hold a conversation and where you're not chasing a personal best. 3 to 4 strength boot camps a week, the same 6:15 a.m. ones I started after Nepal. I just stopped relying on them to do work they couldn't do. 10,000 steps a day. Singapore makes that easier than people think. Covered walkways, MRT instead of taxis, walking to meetings where I can swing them. And the big one, no alcohol. I'm experimenting with this, mainly to see what happens to those weekends. By the time you hear this, I'll be a month dry, including through a holiday, which is the real test. And finally, the treats, the sweets, the biscuits, the late night sugar I used to use as stress release, all gone. And the upside of all of this is so far, I've lost about 8 kilograms in 2 months. Muscle held, visceral fat dropping. My Aura Ring metrics are through the roof. Heart rate variability, resting heart rate recovery, all trending the right way. I'm not telling you any of this to flex. I'm telling you because at 40, with sleep apnea, near obese on DEXA, with bloods that should have terrified me, change was still possible. I told myself I was over the hill, and I was absolutely wrong about that. There's another 6 months of work before I'm where I want to be, but the light is back. The motivation is back. There's a version of me that wants to do big things again. The one who climbed Denali, the one who didn't apologize for showing up. I want him back. And then this flu hit and knocked me sideways for 2 weeks, and I had 2 weeks of lying there with all of it. Which brings me to what I'm actually afraid of. I'm not afraid of dying old. I'm not afraid of slowing down at 80. That's the deal we sign. I'm afraid of hitting fire in 2027, walking out the office, and finding out that the version of me on the other side is too broken to live the life I built. I'm afraid of the heart attack that doesn't give me time to course correct. I'm afraid of the mental health stuff that comes with being trapped in a body you don't like. Because that's the bit nobody talks about. When your body limits you, your mind closes in. You self-limit. You stop saying yes to things. You isolate. You feel old in ways that aren't about the calendar. I felt the edges of that this year. The I can't do that anymore voice. The that's for younger people voice. I'm afraid of what that voice does if I let it run for another decade. I'm afraid of what it'll do to my husband. He didn't sign up for a husband who shrinks. He didn't sign up for a partner who arrives at the finish line and discovers there's nothing left to spend. And I'm afraid of having deferred for years. Every late night at the office, every weekend on a deal, every I'll do that when I'm free, and arriving at the freedom with a body that already cashed in too many chips. 2 weeks of flu have made that feel very real. 2 weeks of needing more recovery than I used to. 2 weeks of watching my body remind me, slowly and quietly, what I'd been doing to it. There's no fire number big enough to compensate for arriving broken. So here's where all of this fits. The regular show is going to keep running. Same cadence, same topics, we're not pivoting. The deep dives and quick takes and the rants about fire, all of that continues. But alongside that, once a month for the next 12 months, I want to take stock. A real monthly check-in, the final year before fire, documenting it pillar by pillar in real time. And 5 pillars. Health is the first, it's the foundation. Because if you don't have this, none of the others matter. Money. Most of you came for this. We'll keep going on the maths, the runway, the post-fire income, the spreadsheets. But it's only one pillar of 5. The next is identity. Who am I when the lawyer title goes? I've already talked around this on the show, but the next 12 months are going to test it for real. Then relationships, my husband, friends, colleagues. The community work has to start now if there's going to be one on the other side. And then finally, purpose. Why I'm getting up in the morning when nobody's paying me to. That's going to be the architecture for the year ahead. Each month, one pillar, an honest update, not the curated version, the real one, including the bits I'm not proud of. So before we close, here's what I want you to sit with this week. You've probably got a net worth tracker, a budget, a fire calculator with dates and the rates and the projections. The money pillar is well documented in your life. What's the equivalent for your body? When did you last go and get your bloods done? When did you last do a DEXA scan? If the answer is I don't know, or a while ago, or never, that's the work this week. And if you've got the numbers and they're not where you want them to be, you're not alone. Mine sat on my phone for months before I did anything. Data doesn't have teeth. You're going to need a different reason. And I hope yours is something gentler than mine was. Thanks for listening to Life After Enough, a podcast about money, meaning, and the life you design when work becomes optional. If this episode made you rethink your future, share it with someone who's starting to question the script too. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Nick, and I'll see you next week as we keep building a life that's truly ours.